CPI turned out to be good news for the market, and we're seeing the SPY actually head higher. And if we just switch over and see the Qs, we're actually heading higher as well, taking out that previous sell signal of that divergence between the SPY. But if this is all good news and we're supposed to head higher from here, then why is the smart money telling us something a little bit different? Welcome to my channel, and on this channel we like to give you guys some technical analysis for the SPY Qs, Apple, Tesla, Amazon, and Nvidia, which is very important to pay attention to when we do have a big event, which comes tomorrow. In the morning, we do get the PPI month over month, which previously came in at negative 0.5, but actually seems like it's supposed to tick up. So we'll have to see what comes from that. But the main thing everyone's paying attention to is the Fed interest rate decision. Me, myself, I'm more paying attention to that economic projections because right now it seems that the market thinks that we are going to be seeing some drastic cutting when we actually could be cutting a little bit less, and that needs to be priced in to this market. On the SPY, we were about to reach that daily expected move up in this area, but we couldn't quite get there. We just saw some trickling up buying with not a lot of selling going on throughout the entire day. Now, we saw this coming because CPI has been good to us. So I really should be, putting a thumbs up on here and giving you guys a pat on the back for today, because we were just stating how the CPI has been very good to the market for the past few months, and that is most likely going to continue as of today. And it seems we were correct in that assessment. Now, I have updated that daily range for tomorrow, and it seems we have another big range going on. Okay, so you can't quite see this pink line here, so I'm just going to tell you it's at 467.79 to the upside and 460.41 to the downside. And this is a very big range. We had a big range today, and we actually almost got there. So we need to dig into this and see if we're finding any signals that could say that we are going to reverse from this area. Before we switch over to shorter time frames, I just want you to see how high we have gone in the SPY without some kind of meaningful pullback at this point, which just leads me to believe if this thing does want to drop and people do get a reason to hit that sell button, it can get pretty ugly pretty dang quick. I am going to give us one thumbs up and pat on the back, so give this video a like if you did find this information helpful yesterday, because we actually stated how around this area we are in those overbought conditions, right, on the RSI. But with an event like tomorrow, I always tell you, when you do have a big event, giving some data, if it is bullish, we can ignore any kind of technical signals, any kind of divergences on a 15-minute, and just see this buying continue. It looks like we're in even further overbought territory, which is very interesting going into tomorrow. Now with the SPY, I wanted to bring up the most important thing to possibly pay attention to. And when you look at those shorter time frames, you're going to see divergences, you're going to see all kinds of things, but the important part is we're still going up because we're in that positive territory. So I felt it was important to show you guys what I'm paying attention to, and that is this divergence that could be forming here on the MACD and the RSI. We can see if we actually do roll over, getting that green bar today, if we are able to roll over either with the Fed tomorrow or right after the Fed, we would get some kind of divergence up here. If we remain flat also on this RSI, you'd have both at the same time, which is a pretty strong signal that we are going to see some kind of pullback. Switching over to the Qs, I just wanted to take this moment to mention that this Saturday morning video is going to be different. We are going to be giving the big picture of what could actually be happening when we do see this overall pullback, which could get pretty dramatic because we've seen this thing go up and up and up for months now. Now we can pay attention to that divergence on the daily on the Qs, but I just wanted to show you guys the hourly here and show how we were overbought and we continue to be overbought, and we see that trend extending. And this is most likely because the sellers can't come in because the CPI is bullish for the market. The sellers don't necessarily have a reason to come in at this point until tomorrow. We have to pay attention to what is said tomorrow. And if we do not get any kind of bad news tomorrow, then we could see this thing squeeze even higher and come up to that weekly expected move. But possibly after people realize that we're not going to be cutting rates as steeply as people presume, then we could see a post-Fed sell-off. So we could see this fade pretty quickly. And overall, what this means on a daily perspective, you really want to pay attention to these moves. If you get outside of this weekly and even you go test that top of this daily expected move at 403.21, you would be looking for that to quickly fade early on in the day as a signal that we are actually topping out. And maybe this is actually the wrong direction and we need to start heading lower. If we do break down early in the day, that's the best part about having these daily ranges on the Qs here. If we do break down early in the day, we can pay attention to this level here of 394.13. So if we do hit that pretty early on in the day, look for us to bounce from that level and close back within this zone, because we do close within this zone 68% of the time. This is where I wanted to point something out. We see the Qs heading higher and the SPY looks very similar, but if this is such a strong move, then why is Apple not participating as much, right? We're seeing Apple actually hold at a lower level, and why is Amazon not participating? And we're going to get into these individual stocks, but I just want to show you guys that difference. These bigger stocks are not buying into this move as much, and that means that either with good news, we actually can see stocks explode, or these stocks are hinting at us that there may be a reason for us to head lower at this point. And I'm just going to keep clicking through because we can see Nvidia has the same story. We're hitting that lower level, and Nvidia is what actually kind of told us early on that we were going to get some kind of pullback. Microsoft here, we're not buying into this either. We're not making a new high at this point. Google, we're not making a high at this point. Meta, we're not making a high at this point. So I just wanted to show you guys how a lot of the bigger stocks are not buying into this big move that's happening in the SPY and the Qs. Now, don't get it twisted because Apple actually is looking bullish, okay? We get some kind of pullback and we look like we're wanting to go higher. But at this point, what we notice is there's just a big divergence between the actual Qs and these big stocks that make it up, which is something we want to pay attention to. Apple itself, though, we're holding at that 9-day moving average that we talked about. We talked about touching the bottom of our weekly expected move and how we're going to possibly see some strength from that area with the CPI. Shorter time frames, we were paying attention to this 30-minute divergence, and it played out really nicely to the downside. And we talked about it coming down to fill this gap and come down to that weekly expected move, which is exactly where we see that support come in. It's within 10 cents of that weekly expected move, which makes these very powerful. So if you do want these types of things for individual stocks, you can go down in the link below to get to my Patreon where I give these out every Sunday. Right now, what I really wanted to point out was I wanted to take away this wedge real quick and just see how we were going across at this level, right? And the fact that Apple is not buying into this move. The Qs are going higher, but if the Qs are going higher, then why isn't the most loved stock ever going higher with it? And that's something to pay attention to. But right now, all I see is a left and a head and a right shoulder. And this can start to break down pretty quickly if we break through actually probably that weekly range. So if we start to break below this weekly range, below that 191, it gets us right back in this gray area that we've talked about in the past, which has produced a lot of sell-offs in that area. That would be a bearish take, and the bullish take here would be we need to come close this gap or come test some kind of higher level. And the reason that you do have some probabilities of that happening is because on the hourly on Apple, you are in that positive territory. So we're in that positive territory on the MACD, which is really important. We weren't able to start a negative trend, but you can see if this is able to roll over and maybe roll over pretty sharply and hold up at this weekly expected move and break down, then we would be in that negative territory and you would have a series of lower lows at that point. Good to pay attention to all the stocks that we talk about on this channel because there are some different things happening on each stock. So it's cool to pay attention to, and that could be an indication of what to come, right? So we paid attention to Nvidia reversing earlier than everything else, and we were able to use that as some evidence for pullbacks coming. And then we start to head higher with the CPI, but you notice that the Qs and the SPY are heading higher, and Amazon is not participating yet. Now, Amazon still does have the chance, as this daily is in positive territory, to go higher, right? And maybe set up some kind of divergence between this high. But at this point, you have to say, we're coiling up in here. You got kind of a range, right? We do have some sort of range in here. And if we do break below that range, these Bollinger Bands are so tight that we are going to see a very big move. So as we are stuck in this range, that just tells us, hey, if we do break out, maybe we do get a big move, but then you have to be weary that there is some kind of divergence forming down here on the MACD. But because this MACD is still in positive territory, if it's able to curl up, we could see that positive trend continue. And then we'll be looking for that divergence. But actually, if we break to the downside out of this range, and we see this start to break down, then we can start to head to lower levels. That first point I'm paying attention to, 134.48, some good support in there. But overall, we're looking for this big head and shoulders to carve out. So we see the left, we see the head, and now if we get that pullback, we can actually see some kind of right shoulder setup in the near future. And overall, what we'd be paying attention to at that point is the daily and seeing if we head to lower levels on this MACD starts to trickle down pretty quickly, and then maybe we start to curl up, giving us that indication that there is one more push in this overall move. And this is something that we're going to talk about pretty extensively on my Saturday morning video. So join us back on Saturday morning. The only other thing about Amazon in this range that I would like to talk about is if we do explode higher out of this range tomorrow, sometimes it is the first move is the wrong move. And if we do extend higher and break out of this range, really pay attention if that is fading throughout the day and we close back within this range. That is going to be very telling, and it could be a sign that Amazon itself is topping. Since we were talking about ranges and Bollinger Bands, look how tight the Bollinger Band is on Tesla. This is one of the tightest ones as well. Amazon and Tesla are really tight, so we're expecting a big move. And where could this overall lead? Well, if we do break to the upside, once again, look for that to fade throughout the day, because sometimes the first move is not the correct one. And by end of day, we could close back within this range, which could hint at some kind of double topping. And it could also hint that we just are seeing those sellers step in, and if we close back within this range, maybe we're actually going to break it the other way and head to lower levels. So what we want to pay attention to here is this MACD curling over. You can see it's just about to cross, and if it does cross, what we can say is this is more in negative territory. So you do have a chance that Tesla actually does drop off more than other stocks, but I am still paying attention to this 207.42 because it's been very important in the past. Tesla's one that we will pay attention to the hourly because it's down in that negative territory. So if it does curl up and curl back down, we will continue that negative trend and see another low come in. And if we are able to break this level, look for it to be retested and head down even lower if this negative trend holds and we keep seeing that MACD crossover again and again after that consolidation to head lower and give us the next low. So really, we are in negative territory on Tesla. It looks like we could be breaking early on, but I just wanted to tell everyone that a lot of the time with this info and with OpX, we could actually see an extension higher that then fades throughout the end of the week, and we close back within this zone, and then we could see a break of that zone next week. Come back tomorrow to see some information on Nvidia, because we might actually be giving us a thumbs up if something happens here for tomorrow. So come back if you want that thumbs up tomorrow. Overall, with Nvidia, it's still the similar thing. We're trying to figure out if this is up an ABC pattern to the upside, right? Or if this is actually going to be an ABC pattern down to lower levels into our zone that we've had marked off for quite some time. Now, this level here of 459.54 has actually been holding up pretty nicely. And what we were talking about here was some kind of cup closing in this area and then giving us that handle. And at this moment, we do still have that handle. The other thing on the daily we were paying attention to is the fact that what if this MACD doesn't cross? Okay, so it was a little bit further away. It might take a little more effort to cross on this MACD, kind of confirming another extension in this positive trend. But that hasn't happened at this moment, and that's what we were paying attention to on Nvidia. So if Nvidia does actually get some kind of upward move and fade, this MACD still will not cross, and we could see that second leg in this ABC pattern coming pretty quickly. Nvidia still is that good example of that negative trend. You see how the MACD is able to hold in this negative territory, getting a bunch of crosses, which gives us new lows. And as we do creep into that positive territory, we start to get the higher lows. Okay, now on Nvidia, this is something we were talking about. And since it is not seeing a terrible amount of bullishness after getting a good CPI reading, we were paying attention to some kind of left, head, and right shoulder. And now we're getting to the area where that could be invalidated. So if we are going to turn around and this move is going to confirm this little structure here, then we would like to see this actually break below this little trend line here and start to head to lower levels come morning. And the only other thing I would point out on the hourly here is if we do see this actually come to fruition, if we actually do close down, it would make sense, because as of right now, we do see that divergence on both the RSI and the MACD at the same time. So if this is able to roll over and confirm, then you are right next to that negative territory, and you have a very good shot of taking out this low and starting that negative trend. Today, I did want to throw in AMD just for a different style of take, okay, just because it's a lot different than other stocks. This one actually is participating in this move, taking out this high, looks very similar to the SPY and the Qs at this point, so I thought it'd be fun to talk about, and we just see how we're getting really overextended outside of those Bollinger Bands. So in this case, this wouldn't be a, oh, we're looking for divergence. There is no divergence here. We're just in extremely overbought territory on a daily, and we could see a pullback. And so before we actually want to head higher here, if we are going to continue to head higher, it would be really healthy for us to pull down into this area to catch up to at least this 9-day moving average, and then we kind of ride that 9-day moving average up. But if we actually start to lose these, then you're just going to look for that next moving average, which could actually be at that 116.81 if we start to break down very soon. This is the 10-year yield in front of us, and we almost got a big thumbs up and a pat on the back because we were stating how this CPI actually could be good for the market, and we could see that 10-year yield push down and then buy back up throughout the day, and it looks like that's exactly what happened, but we didn't get to close above that 9-day moving average like we said, so we don't really deserve that full-fledged thumbs up. Now, as of right now, we are seeing a green bar above the 9-day moving average, and we're seeing a green bar pop up on the histogram on the MACD, which just tells us that momentum could shift, and we're not that far away from positive territory, so we can see a pretty strong move here. Now, how high could we go? I just wanted to give you the worst case scenario pretty much. We could go as high as 4.8 in these rates when this move is done. So if we do want to extend high enough because the volatility is so tight and things like that, we're seeing a lot of stuff that is bought up for a long time without any kind of pullback. We actually could see this extend as high as 4.8 before this move is done. That's where it's good to switch over to TLT. If we did head to that 4.8 level, you actually would be closing this gap down in here around that $85 price mark. So this gap down here could be filled if we see those rates go crazy tomorrow. And overall with this, we were also pointing out that difference between the Qs, the SPY, and all the stocks, right? All the stocks are looking like TLT, which is just telling you that smart money is not buying into it yet. Maybe they just want to see what Jerome Powell or whoever says tomorrow. Maybe they want to see what that Fed rate decision is. Maybe they want to wait for the economic projections, but right now they are waiting for that info before deciding if they fully want to sell this thing off, close below the 9, close below the 20, or if they want to see another extension. So smart money is seeing a little bit reason to be hesitant, which is something to pay attention to as the SPY and Qs head higher. Now, the main area for TLT that I am paying attention to is right around this 87.80. I think this gap fill right here will be a great level for TLT to hold up, but we have to pay attention to what's actually happening. And so if I do see this MACD curl over, all right, if it curls down, all I'm going to do is pay attention to when it starts to curl up and crosses back into positive territory, which most likely tells us that this move is going to be extended. We are going to see this come down, and once it crosses, we can see that start to extend higher throughout the next few weeks once that happens. You may get 2 thumbs up tomorrow because we are seeing the VIX do exactly what we've been talking about ever since we got into these levels, which is test that level of 1212. That reading of 1212 is an area that produces a lot of volatility spikes. So we already went over that. If you want to see that in the previous videos, we went over it yesterday. So just click into the channel and check that out. Skip to the end. We usually do VIX at the end, but we are seeing that get tested at this point. So if volatility comes back into this market, you can see how tight these Bollinger Bands are. It's going to be pretty dramatic. If the stock market doesn't necessarily want to top with the Fed anyway, if we don't want to top as of tomorrow, we want to head to higher levels, maybe to get rid of that OpEx, and then we sell off next week, kind of a post-Fed sell-off, then we may actually see the VIX here come down to lower levels and get some kind of retest, which would set up some kind of divergence forming down here on the MACD. So this is what I'll pay attention to if we start to get bullish over the next couple days, but it looks like if we get some bad news tomorrow, volatility can come back into this market very quickly. The last thing we'll talk about, which is the difference between the VIX and the VVIX, and we pointed this out, and sometimes it does lead to those reversals. It's a little signal that just tells you, hey, be a little bit cautious. The Bollinger Bands are tight, and we're seeing the VIX actually head to lower levels while the VVIX is holding up. This isn't a signal that says, hey, someone's going to sell everything tomorrow. This is a signal saying if there is some bad news, then volatility can spike very quickly, especially when the Bollinger Bands are as tight as this. We can see the volatility of the volatility skyrocket. Overall takeaway from this video is it really looks like we are going to reverse from here if we get some kind of bad news, and we may see some kind of post-Fed sell-off even going on into next week because of these options expiring this Friday. So we can see that there are a ton of puts. You're getting a reading of 2.4 put-call ratio for Friday, which may want to be squeezed a little bit more by these market makers before we actually see that full-fledged sell-off come. So maybe after options expiration, we could head a little bit higher until then, and that's where we're going to pay attention to those weekly expected moves. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And tune in this Saturday so we can go over some macro stuff for you. I feel like it's good to every once in a while refresh ourselves and go over the bigger picture. But as of right now, I just wish you guys all the luck in the world trading tomorrow. Make sure to manage that risk as we are seeing some bigger daily moves come in. But have a good night. Peace.